This one is for the Gothic romance lovers because spooky season is finally here. And since it's Fall Book Friday, that means I'm gonna share some of the coziest and spookiest, today pretty spooky, recommendations for you to add to your TBR this fall. And Lulu has made an appearance already. We're gonna start with the classics and bring it all the way to the modern day because my background is in literature, comparative literature. And while we do this, we are going to address some of the classist and the sexist roots, the elitist roots that really inspired and shaped the genre and have made it a women-led, women-dominated space today. We are going to end with some of the Booktok books because I am very, very interested in how pop culture and how Booktok culture is shaping the book world. If you like this video, please subscribe. This is actually my first long-form YouTube video that I have filmed horizontally and it feels kind of strange. We need to start out with a book that I actually do not have. I used to have it and I got rid of it because I did not like it. I read it in undergrad. Northanger Abbey. This book came out in 1817 and this was a really pivotal book in the Gothic romance genre because it's actually a parody of Gothic romance. It took some of the tropes that we saw in historical Gothic literature, Otranto, Udolpho. The setting of Gothic novels has remained the same since the 1700s, all the way to the present where we have kind of castles, fortresses, Gothic, but mysterious, foggy, dark, atmospheric settings. However, the early books really did portray women as a damsel in distress. So Jane Austen wrote this as a book where she really plays with some of these ideas, pokes fun, over-exaggerates some of these ideas. Now, personally, I did not really enjoy the book. I did read it my first year of college, and I really just don't think I had the knowledge or the understanding, the contextual understanding of the time period to fully appreciate the book for what it was. I would recommend it now if you are really, really interested in the history of Gothic literature. However, I cannot say that you're going to enjoy it. But I did need to start with that book because it was really, really pivotal in starting to shape the changing nature of Gothic literature. That brings me to Wuthering Heights, which was published in 1847. Wuthering Heights is considered absolutely pivotal in Gothic romance and in shaping the genre moving forward. And there are a few reasons for that. First of all, Wuthering Heights is not a romance novel in the sense that you're gonna get a happy ending. It really deconstructed that idea because this is about I cannot think of the word, but this is about kind of the dangers of a very passionate, quick, all-consuming romance, an abusive relationship. The narrator is very unreliable. And so what Emily Bronte did with this Gothic novel is she added kind of a psychological element where we're not just taking place in a Gothic setting and there's not just this external danger. Now, the main characters themselves are experiencing a lot of psychological distress and turmoil. They are unreliable and they are not necessarily the heroes. And now it is really important to talk about how this book was received at its time of publication in the mid-19th century. Because today we consider Wuthering Heights to be one of the best works of literature ever written. That was not the case when this book was published. It received a lot of criticism. It was considered overly emotional, overly sensitive because it was written by women and it was predominantly women who were reading the novel. The fictional novel or the fictional story rose to prominence in the mid-1800s as as literacy was increasing. So now we started to see the masses. We saw women, we saw people who previously could not have access to education, lower classes gaining the ability to read. And the fictional novel started to be seen as this source of entertainment or pleasure. We do today understand that there's a lot of value in fictional novels, but at the time, the kind of dominant theory of the time, or the dominant ideas, was that any fictional novel is frivolous. It is corrupting the mind. It is going to corrupt civilization. And so there isn't really this moral value to reading them. the dominant thought was that reading should be about reading political text, political theory, economic text, theological text, these really, you know, high level kind of texts with these ideas that were considered very moral and enlightening. And so a novel like this, written by women, enjoyed by the lower classes, was really seen as subverting norms and being too emotional. Sounds like something that we still see a lot today. And that is why I think it is really important to understand the history of books, of literature, of the novel, even of fiction, and the gender dynamics that were at play, because those are still very much at play today when we look at Booktok books and the criticism that a lot of them are receiving. And that brings us to Rebecca, which was published in 1938. And I actually have not read this book, so I'm just going to give a kind of basic overview of my understanding of it and its importance to the genre. Today, Rebecca is largely regarded as a book that deconstructs and challenges traditional gender roles and social roles. And that is another reason why some of these books throughout time, especially in the 19th century, were seen as so problematic. The popularity of this book, to me, not only signifies the enduring nature of Gothic literature as a space for women to explore the psychological impacts of gender roles and social implications, social narratives, but it also shows us conversations that were taking place at the time that this book was written in the 1930s. And now we are changing gears, since Booktok is one of my absolute interests, and I do believe that Booktok has a lot of wonderful books that often get written off very, very quickly because of the fact that they gain traction on Booktok. Rather, I believe it's really important to look at what is happening culturally, socially, who is defining which books are important, and consider whether or not the dismissal of those books has its roots in sexism, in misogyny, in the historic legacy of belittling women's spaces. And we are going to start out with One Dark Window by Rachel Gillig, because this is a phenomenal, phenomenal book. It is very creative, and it is definitely something that is defining the Gothic romance genre right now. Part of me does wonder if part of the reason why Gothic romance and even fantasy romance, because today a lot of the books that we are seeing in the Gothic romance genre, there's also very, very strong fantastical elements. I would need to do more research, because personally it's not something I've actually done research. It's just this idea that I have, but I do feel like potentially kind of the dark Gothic novel is an outlet to explore some of our fears and tensions that are taking place within society. After One Dark Window, I have to talk about Anathema by Carrie Lake, because this is a masterpiece in my opinion. Anathema is a Gothic romantasy. It is an epic high fantasy. It takes place in a completely imaginary world, which is something that we did not see really previously with the Gothic romance genre. Now the books that are very much gaining prominence, a lot of them are taking place in fantastical, completely fantastical worlds. It has horror elements, and it does have some spice. So it's definitely catering to the current day, the current things that people want to see in literature, the current things that women want to see in books. And yes, I do consider this a work of literature, because the emotional, psychological depth, the depth of the world building in this book, it is so, so deep. I had to go back and read part one a second time and reference the glossary, because there's a multiple page glossary with magnitudes of world building. And last but not least, we have A Dowry of Blood by S.T. Gibson. I can definitely see some debate about this book and whether or not it truly belongs in Gothic romance, but I wanted to talk about it because it is horror, Gothic romance, and let me give you some context. This is a retelling of the story of Dracula, but it is told from the perspective of one of Dracula's wives. She's in an abusive relationship, so we can see parallels with Rebecca. And it is a story about the connection and the romantic interests that are formed between Dracula's wives and the power that they are able to try to maintain or get from this shared knowledge and shared understanding of their situation. So I call this a romance in the sense that there's these romantic undertones. If you have read any of these books, if you have questions, let me know. If you have recommendations, let me know. If there's a type of genre that you want to learn more about, let me know. And if you like this video, you should subscribe, because it would help me out a lot.